purifying gold. When people like dig up gold, there's a lot of impurities in it. There's a lot of things in it that make it not pure, right? And a refiner's job is to put the gold through the fire. It's to burn away the impurities. It's to just make it more pure. And if we go to the next slide, these are some definitions of what refine means. I don't know why it's like that, but so the first definition, can we all read that together? To refine is to, okay, and next, to free from moral imperfections, to be made pure or perfect, to improve or perfect by pruning or polishing. These definitions are found in like the Merriam-Webster dictionary, and it just sounds very biblical, right? Like all these words just sound super, super biblical. To be free from impurities, to be taken through a process where the things inside of you that are impure are stripped away, and to be free from moral imperfections, to be made pure or perfect, right? That process isn't light. It's not something that is easy, and it's not something that is painless, right? When you think about gold being purified, you're putting it through the fire. You're burning it away from its impurities. And I believe that that's what God wants us to do as we mature in our relationship with Christ, is to be refined by his presence, to be refined by his plan for us. A quite literal example of this story comes from the book of Daniel, and it's about three guys named Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And Lando talked a lot about this, so I'm just going to go over it a little bit. If we can go to the next slide. If you guys aren't familiar with this story of, another one, do the other slide. The one before that, there you go. The fourth man in the fire. So that's Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And if you guys aren't familiar of this story, there was three guys who were in the city of Babylon named Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And during their time, there lived a king who wanted everyone in Babylon to worship him. They wanted everyone to fall to their knees and bow down to him when they would play the harp or a lyre or musical instruments. When they would hear that, he would want every citizen in Babylon to bow down to him. And these three men who were faithful servants of God chose not to bow down, right? And they were brought to the king and given one chance to bow one more time. And they denied it and were like, no, like, we're not going to do that. We serve one God, and we don't bow down to any false gods. And so the king, in his furious rage, threw them into a fiery furnace that was raised up all the way to its highest heat. And he threw them in there, and while in the midst of the fire, a fourth man showed up in the fire. And I think we can all guess who the fourth man was. So can we all say that in 3, 2, 1? Who is the fourth man? Jesus, right? Like the fourth man was Jesus, and he was with them in the fire, and it made them not burn. They were not touched by the fire. They were not harmed by the fire. Even their hair wasn't scorched. Their clothes weren't burned at all. And when they stepped out, the king was amazed and actually promoted them to a level of authority in the kingdom. So this is actually really important in our lives too, in this story, because while we might be in the midst of a fire right now in our lives, Jesus is there with us, and he promises to never leave us. So whatever tribulation, trial we go through, we know that Jesus is with us, and we know that he's with us hand in hand, so that we won't be burned, so that we won't be, so we won't die, and so that we won't fall into something that we can't handle. But the thing about this story is that they still needed to step into the fire. It wasn't like God destroyed the fiery furnace or God put out the fire. No, they had the fire, and they took a step of action of faith into the fire. And that's when God showed up, right? When they took this action. When you're in the presence of God, there is a supernatural peace from above that will get you through the situation. And I believe that supernatural peace overwhelmed these people, these three men, who were able to overcome the situation and just walk straight into the fire. But my question when I listen to this story is like, us as Christians, right? We look at the story and we admire these three men. But how can we get to a level of the same kind of faith? How can we get to the level of our faith where we are willing to step into a fiery furnace, right? In order for the glory of God to be shown through us. How can we achieve this step of action regardless of the fear of what might happen, and to have faith into the promises of God? Because it's not just having faith, right? It's not just believing and then things will be okay. It's believing, having faith, and then taking action. It's taking that step of action. And that's what these guys did. They had to step into the furnace. They faced it, and they had to step into it in order for the glory of God to be revealed through them. But that's something I want to talk about today, is how can we overcome this fear sometimes? How can we take that step of action regardless of what we're feeling and have faith? Because let's be honest, a lot of us would look at this situation and just be immediately consumed with fear. I know, like me personally, I would, right? I'm not stepping into a fiery furnace. Like, that's kind of crazy for me. But if we can look to the next slide, it should be a Bible verse. Daniel 3, verse 17 to 18. So I'm just going to read this out loud. It says, if we are thrown into, this is the words of Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego. They said, if we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. This to me speaks volumes. This verse in the story speaks so much volume. They had the faith that God could deliver them. They believed that God could deliver them. But they didn't think that God would do it, right? Like, they didn't think that he immediately would do it. Like, it's not like they stepped into it and their reaction was that God will deliver them. I think that for them, it was either God delivered them or God's plan for them to die was then in the moment, and that they would be with their Father. And that's something that's so powerful to me. It's like, okay, like they believed. Yes, they had the faith, but they were okay if God didn't deliver them. They were okay with dying in that very moment to be with their Father. And that's the type of faith that like is admirable in the Bible, right? Like people who are willing to die for their faith, people who are willing to sacrifice their whole lives for their faith in what they believe in. It's not that they knew God would deliver them, but they knew God's plan was always good from the start. And that if it was between meeting their God or worshiping a false one, that the choice was pretty easy for them. If we skip a couple chapters ahead in the book of Daniel, we see this kind of faith too with Daniel in the lion's den. If you guys know the story, a similar situation kind of happened with Daniel, who was thrown into the lion's den after he refused to give up worshiping his God and praying to his God. He was thrown into the lion's den, and the same level of faith he had, God had rescued him and delivered him from that situation. But if we go towards Daniel chapter 7 until chapter 12, it's towards the end of the book of Daniel, his demeanor kind of changes. And this was really interesting to me in this book, because the first few chapters of Daniel really shows crazy faith, right? It shows like a faith that is admirable. It shows a faith that is obviously strong. But towards this ending, Daniel receives a revelation from God, actually about the end days. And, when we talk about the end days, it can be kind of like a touchy subject, right? Because we get a little bit scared of it. Or some of us might be, I don't know, not so scared of it. But I think most of us, when we think about the end days, we get scared. And Daniel also felt the same way. In chapters 7 and until chapter 12, he talks about his visions and dreams from God. If we can go to the slide before this. Yeah. So these are two verses in the Bible where Daniel is just talking about how he felt after receiving these visions of the end days. And these are like apocalyptic visions. These are visions of the world destroying and beasts arising. So this is what Daniel says. He says, and I, Daniel, was overcome and lay sick for some days. Then I rose and went about the king's business, but I was appalled by the vision and did not understand it. And in chapter 7, he also says, here's the end of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my thoughts greatly alarmed me, and my color changed, but I kept the matter in my heart. So Daniel was overcome with fear that he even fell sick. Overcome with so much fear about the end days, overcome with so much fear about the vision that God had given him, overcome with fear of his own future that he fell sick. And I think that, this is something that's relatable to us because there's a lot of characters in the Bible who have admirable faith and admirable lives and journeys, but they, at the end of the day, were still human. They felt the same fear we do. They felt the same pain we do. They felt the same worry we do. And this is an example of Daniel just feeling fear about his own future, feeling fear about the future of the world, more than that. So I know that these were great men of God, like I said, but they also felt this fear. And how many of us have been overcome by fear in the same way about our own futures, right? How many of us have been overcome with fear about what would happen tomorrow or the next day, or what career we'll have, how much money we'll make, or being able to find something for us in our futures? Like we often get overcome by the fear of thinking about our futures, right? So today, I kind of just want to talk about some of these prophetic visions from Daniel and what it revealed to Daniel, and some things that I want to share with you that I found personally interesting. So bear with me, okay? I know we don't got a lot of time, but but can you imagine Daniel, right? He receives this big prophetic vision from God, and it involves the fate of the entire world. And it's terrifying him. He doesn't know what to do about it. God actually tells him to keep it secret. So he has this big prophetic vision that involves the fate of himself and every person on this planet and in the future as well. And he has to keep it to himself. And he is just overcome with this overbearing fear. And I think what Daniel is trying to convey to us in these chapters, in this verse, in Daniel chapter 8 and 7, is that the thing that God is revealing to him is extremely, extremely heavy. It involves everyone, involves the fate of everyone, and it's something that is overbearing for him. But God knew that he could handle it, which is why he gave it to him, which is why he was able to give him this vision. This is something that Daniel was kind of in fear about because he knew it was coming, right? But how many of us feel fear of something that we don't know is coming? I think oftentimes that is something that we can all relate to. We don't know what's coming in the future. So we get scared of it. We get nervous. We get kind of fearful of what is to come and what is coming for our futures, our careers, even what is happening with the stability of the world right now, the future of this world. I think we're all nervous about it, right? We're all fearful about it. And right now, we're seeing a lot of things happening in the world, a lot of wars and rumors of wars. And right now we're seeing war in the Middle East and over Jerusalem. And I'm not going to touch on that subject too much, but I think I just want to reiterate that, when we see, as Christians, right, when we see war over Jerusalem, that's a prophetic sign. That is something that is prophetic and something that us Christians should pay attention to, right? It's something that God is trying to tell us something. Because it's not just about what's going on in our personal lives, what's going on over here in America. Jerusalem was the holy city of God. So whatever happens in that city is prophetic to us. It's something that we should pay attention to. And it's something that we need to open up our eyes and try and see what God is trying to reveal to us. Because I do believe that during these times, God is He's given us signs. He's given us things to pay attention to. And He's trying to unveil something before our very eyes. And it's so easy to be distracted in this world. It's so easy to kind of brush those thoughts away and kind of just be on our phones, right? Which is why I think it's really important to pay attention to these signs, because I believe that distraction is one of those things that, it keeps you away. It keeps your attention away from the things that are really important in your life. And it concerns every one of us, because I do believe that God is trying to tell us something. He's trying to tell you something about what's to come and what is happening right now. So if we can go to the next slide. No, the other slide, title slide. No. Are you ready for God's apocalypse? That one. Yep. Okay, right here. This is the title of my message. Are you ready for an apocalypse from God? And when I say this, I know we all are automatically thinking, are we ready for the end of the world? That's not what I'm saying, okay? An apocalypse, actually, biblically, the word apocalypse comes from the Greek word apocalypsis, which means revealing, disclosure, or to take off the cover. It means to unveil something supernaturally in the spiritual realm. Like, it means that God is unveiling something within us when it's an apocalypse from God. In other words, a biblical definition of this is for God to lift the veil from our eyes and to see something that we don't usually see. And usually after an apocalypse from God, radical change follows after, right? Radical change in their lives. They begin to do something different. And we see a lot of examples in this in the Bible. Last time I preached, we talked about Jacob, and we talked about how he wrestled with God. That was an apocalypse from God. Jacob was changed after that. He was forever changed. Spiritually, physically, he was changed because of an encounter from God. God had lifted a veil from his eyes. Same thing with Paul, the Apostle Paul, when he was out killing Christians, when he was murdering a bunch of Christians, and God had encountered him and changed his life radically. That was an apocalypse from God. And right here as well, with Daniel, when God is revealing to him about the end of days, that's an apocalypse from God, right? He's lifting a veil from us. He's lifting like a curtain. When I say like a veil, like think of it as like there's a curtain over our eyes. We only see the physical. We only see what's in front of us. And an apocalypse is when God lifts that curtain and we're able to see certain things that we weren't able to see before. So I just want to share a few things that I found that I thought were really interesting, and I hope you guys think it's really interesting too. And I believe it's a pretty modern and recent apocalypse from God in this world today. So just a brief story I want to share about the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. How many of you guys know the story of Sodom and Gomorrah? One person, great. Time to read our Bibles, guys. But the story of Sodom and Gomorrah is a story of tragedy. It's a story of destruction. In the Old Testament, there's two cities called Sodom and Gomorrah, and they were filled with sin. They were filled with corruption and just like terrible things that God had opposed. So at one point, God had found no servants there that are righteous. And he had made a decision, and he told Abraham that he made a decision that I'm going to wipe out these two cities because they are doing a disservice to everybody. But then there was a guy named Lot who was there, and God had warned Lot and his family to move out of Sodom and Gomorrah, and it was the only family that escaped Sodom and Gomorrah, and he led them out of there and was able to find sanctuary. But if we can go to the next slide. This is a place called Tal El Hammam, and this place is what some archaeologists believe to be Sodom, or the lost city of Sodom. And it's not proven definitely. There are other sites that they also believe to be Sodom, but this here is actually really interesting to me. It's in the northeastern plains of the Dead Sea, and this is a site where they claimed to be the lost city of Sodom, which was thousands and thousands of years ago. And recent findings in the 21st century, they have discovered destroyed pottery here with surfaces melted into glass, melted bricks, melted plaster, massive quantities of ash, scorched remains of people and vessels, not just randomly, but directionally, orientated in some apparent blast direction from the sky. So they found that a lot of these burnt potteries and bones and stuff like that, there's scorch marks on it. And from the roofs as well, they found scorch marks that is directional from the sky. And it suggests that a major cataclysmic catastrophe had happened in this area. And in 2021, this is from an article, I'm going to read it. In 2021, in the Nature Scientific Reports, it was published that a cosmic airburst destroyed Tal El Hammam. The proposed airburst was larger than the 1908 explosion over Tunguska, Russia, where a 50-meter wide meteor detonated with 1,000 times more energy than the Hiroshima atomic bomb. So there was already kind of a meteor explosion in the 1900s over Russia, which is what they compared this place to. and they found similarities, something of like a meteor coming into the atmosphere and explosion and exploding midair and kind of destroying everything in its past or in its path. For years, the story of the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah was looked at as like a biblical tale, right? Something that was just a metaphor, something that was showing us, oh, don't sin against God or listen to God and like stay away from this. But the evidence that we're finding in the 21st century shows that it's not just biblical tale, that there are remnants of stories of the past, of biblical stories in the past that still live today. And I believe that, could these findings just be like a rare and extraordinary discovery, or is it something else? Is it God like slowly lifting a veil from us, slowly lifting a curtain, showing us that like, hey, like these are not just stories, like this had happened, because these are recent findings, right? And this is thousands of years ahead. So is it possible that God is unveiling something to us, to the Christians here, to the Christians of the world, like these stories did happen, and he's making his way back soon? Could it be that like God is also changing the way that the world looks at these biblical stories, that they're not just myth and folklore and fairy tale, but that they can be biblical or they can be historical and reliable documents, right? So this is what I believe that God is trying to reveal to us. He's trying to show us something that was never revealed before. And the story of Sodom and Gomorrah isn't just a story of destruction, but it's a story of also hesitation, heartbreak, and also looking back. In the story, when Lot was instructed with his family to leave the city of Sodom, he fled, and they were warned, don't look back, do not look back. And wife, in a moment of hesitation, in a moment of regret, she looked back and she was turned into a pillar of salt. So if you can go to the next slide. To some people, this was a symbolic meaning. It was something that was, a metaphor of don't look back, move on from your past, look to the future, right? This was symbolic. But recently, archaeologists find this strange kind of statue right here, right? Right there in the first one. And it's actually, and when they test it, it's actually composed of 80% sodium chloride, which is salt. So it's not proven that this is Lot's wife, but it's a weird coincidence, right? Right off the Dead Sea, right in the location where they believe that Lot had fled Sodom, there lies this weird, tall pillar of salt that just stands there. And, nobody is like, and even locals there call it Lot's wife. It's a site where they're like, oh, that's Lot's wife. And it's not proven, but it is, in my belief, I think it could be, right? But in this story, Lot's wife was also given the same chance to escape Lot. She was warned, and she was pulled by the hand of God. She was convicted in her heart to leave the city and to not look back. But somewhere in between the city and the hills of where she was running to, and in one act of disobedience, she turned back and she was turned into a pillar of salt. Locals have in addition to these findings, archaeologists have long questioned this structure. Like they've looked at it and they're like, oh, like what is it? It makes no sense that a human form or a salt pillar can remain after all these years. But yet here it is, just standing there kind of as a remnant of history, right? And is this a coincidence? It might be, right? But the cross-reference of biblical accounts and archaeological discovery is even hard for secular archaeologists to ignore. And whether or not it's an actual woman beneath this structure, the symbolism it's undeniable. She wasn't destroyed in the fire or consumed by judgment. She simply paused and she looked back at what God told her to leave behind. She wasn't looking towards the future. She wasn't looking towards the promises ahead. She was longing for what once was, instead of having faith for a better tomorrow. And in doing so, she sealed her fate right then and there, and in a moment of regret as well. And I believe her story had lasted thousands of years because it reflects something in every one of us. And it shows that, how many times has God asked us to move forward in our lives? How many times have God asked us to don't look back, keep it going. Don't go back to the things that he's freed you from. Don't go back to the places that he's freed you from. But we keep looking back. We can't let go of it, right? And we can't look to the promises ahead that God has given to us. But this is a story of, something that we can learn from, something that we can look to and think of the things think of the promises that God has for us and kind of hope for that rather than to be stuck in the past, because we know that, being stuck in the past isn't going to really get us anywhere. And how often do we feel torn between the world behind us and the promises ahead, right? Like, Lot's wife wasn't punished without warning. She was invited into salvation. Just like everyone on this earth, she was invited into salvation. But because she couldn't let go of her past, her memory lies in stone today. And it's a testimony for everyone to not dwell on the past, to not look backwards so much, and to look forward to the promises. If we can go to the next slide, just want to show you guys one more thing. After the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah in Genesis 19, it tells us that Lot and his family, or what was left of his family, found refuge, not in a new city, not in a castle or a new high-rise apartment, but they found refuge in a cave. And early Byzantine Christians built a church and monastery that was dedicated to Saint Lot on a hillside near the tower, or near the town of historical Zor, where they believe that the cave Lot found refuge in, early Byzantine Christians built a church and a monastery dedicated to Saint Lot on a hillside near the town of Zor, where they believed to be the cave that Lot found refuge in with his daughters. These early Christians deemed this place to be sacred because they believed that this was the place that God had led Lot to. It wasn't something that was luxurious. It wasn't something that was grand or a new big city, but it was something that God had placed Lot in out of compassion, right? Not out of comfort, not out of an easy route, but out of compassion. His city was gone and his wife was gone. His old life ceased to exist as he knew it. But in that cave, Lot had survived and he was safe. Something that is important about this story and something that I can look to in the story is that, sometimes God's mercy, it doesn't look like a big house. Sometimes God's mercy, it doesn't look like a lot of money. It doesn't look like a high-rise apartment with 3 cars. Sometimes it looks like a cave. God's mercy for Lot was a cave. It was somewhere that he was safe. It was somewhere that he was away from destruction and where he could meditate on God. And that was his mercy. That was his grace for him. And it was a place of grief. It was, because he had lost his wife and everything that he knew. But it was also a place of grace. And I think that this cave is a symbol of how God always provides a way, even after being through the fire, quite literally, right? Because Lot was going to be burned, and he was led away from the destruction. And this is a place where God had placed them after being through the fire. For many people today, the story is just like books and stories, fables and fairy tales, and things that are just metaphors, right? And people even say it's beautiful literature. It's something that is valuable to us, right? But they don't take these as historical documents. They look at it as just stories, right? But what's important about what I'm sharing with you today is that this kind of shifts the perspective. Are these just stories? Are these just metaphors? Are these just stories to encourage us? Or are they real historical documents of what took place on this earth thousands of years ago? They're asking if the proof, or they're asking if the Bible is real and God is real, where's the proof of these stories? And now here in the 21st century, we can quite literally see some of the proof here. Sodom and Gomorrah isn't the only story in the Bible that they have found evidence on. I encourage you guys to, take a look at some of these things that are real today. Like, it's really, really interesting, like the things that they find. But what is God trying to tell us through this, right? What is God revealing to us? Because a lot of this stuff was recently found in the 21st century. It wasn't found 200 or 300 years ago. It wasn't found right after Jesus died. It wasn't found a couple hundred years after Jesus. It was found in this century. It was found in our time. So what is God trying to tell us in this time, right? What is he trying to show us? What veil is he unlifting here? Maybe the time is near. Maybe he's silently screaming to the world that I'm coming back soon and it's time to believe. But I believe that this is what he was trying to tell Daniel through his dreams, through his divine apocalypse. And God didn't show Daniel these things to scare him. He didn't show him these things to scare us, because he knew obviously Daniel would record it and tell the world. But he didn't show us these things as Christians to scare us, to terrify us, right? And I know oftentimes we are terrified of these things. But, God wrote these things so that we can pay attention, so that we know the signs that are coming, and so that we can look and wait for his coming glory. And he shows us these things too so that we can be prepared for the coming trials in our lives. And he shows us the ending, right? He shows us the end of days. He's showing us what's going to happen. But it's not to just tell us about the destruction that's coming, but it's to kind of show us as well that he has a plan for us, right? That he knows the ending for us. He's writing out this ending. This is what's going to happen, he says, right? So he has a plan. He has a plan for the world, which means that he has a plan for you, and that he will be with us till the end. If we can go to the next, if the music team can come up. I'm wrapping up a little bit. But if we can go to the next slide, Matthew 28:20. If we can all read this together. 3, 2, 1. Teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always to the end of the age. So whatever we're going through, whatever we face, trials we're facing, God has made a promise here. He's saying that he's going to be with us till the end, that he's going to walk with us, that he'll be the fourth man in the fire with us till the end. He's revealing these things to show us that he has a plan, so that we can have hope, so that we can have hope in the promises to come, and we can have faith in the promises to come, and to look to that rather than to fear the future or to dwell on the past. Hope for a better tomorrow, hope for the promises of God that he's telling you about today. Because just like Sodom and Gomorrah, Daniel's vision didn't end in destruction, but in mercy and grace for those who are faithful to the Lord. We see the story of Sodom and Gomorrah as destruction, as an annihilation of entire cities. But God had showed grace and mercy for his people. He showed grace and mercy for the ones who were faithful to him, to Lot and his family, to Abraham. And he led them out, and he brought them to a place of sanctuary. He brought them to a place of safety and showed his mercy and grace. And to this day, his name lives on. To this day, the story still breathes. And it ends with victory for the people of God. So don't fear the future, but have hope in the promises of God and look ahead. That's my message today. Thank you guys. God bless you guys.